So this is the third section of the foundation of a successful sales and marketing business. Your database, or more specifically, the long-term value of a database. After 30 years in business, I have a database of over 20,000 contacts in my constant contact account. Yep, 20,000. If I ever met you and got your business card, you went into my database, even if you were not in the mortgage or real estate business. My database is the only marketing I do. I send out emails on a regular basis for my lending business. My click rate and open rate is typically 5 and 10%, and I get a significant amount of inquiries every time I send an email out. It's not uncommon for someone to email, call, or text me and say, "Hey, so-and-so forwarded me your email, and I'm interested in your program. Remember the Thanksgiving Day card and the law of 250? Here it is again." In fact, do you know that studies show that at any point in time, between 10% and 20% of the individuals in your database or someone they know is in need of your services on a monthly basis? Plus, think about this, that 10 to 20% changes every month. So your database can become a great source of business, with your opportunities growing exponentially as the size of your database grows. Unless, of course, you don't have a database. Man, I would hate to tell you how many of my mortgage buddies say to me over and over again, "I really need to work on my database." Yes, you really need to work on your database. Now, some of you may say that your company does this for you. I certainly don't want to cause any problems between an employer or employee, but you need to think about who owns those contacts and what type of content you want being delivered to your contacts. And what happens if you leave that company? I don't want to dwell on this topic other than to give you something to think about. So let's move on from that. Some of you may be familiar with the Pareto principle, or more specifically, the 80-20 rule. In sales, it basically states that 20% of all salespeople make 80% of the commission. However, let me share some statistics with you that might suggest it is more like 90-10. In 2020, which was a record year in the mortgage business, there were 350,000 loan officers in the US. 105,000 did not close a single loan. 167,000 closed less than 30 loans. 38,000 closed less than 60 loans. 25,000 closed between 100 and 200 loans. 6,200 closed between 200 and 300 loans. And 3,500 closed over 300 loans. Now, feel free to do the math, but if you do, you'll see that 10% of the originators did 90% of the business. And what was the one thing these originators have in common? They had constant contact with their database on a consistent basis. Notice I said consistent, because clients live in the land of consistency. You have to be consistent with your marketing efforts. In fact, studies show that 80% of sales are made after the 5th to 12th contact. But more significantly is that only 20% of all sales are made after 4 contacts. In order to get any real traction in your efforts, you really need to make 5+ contacts. I think it's easy to assume that only 10% of loan officers make 4 or more contacts. Another interesting study you need to be aware of states that the average consumer will have 11 mortgage loans in their lifetime. 68 to 73% say they would return to their original lender for a future loan. Yet 77% apply with the first loan officer they speak to at the time they need a loan, even if it is a new loan officer who they have never worked with. Basically, that translates into an 18% retention rate. Why so low? I mean, goodness, that is even lower than the insurance industry, and nobody likes to talk about insurance. Well, according to FHFA, the lifespan of the average mortgage is about 5 years. That's a long time between doing business with the borrower. Unfortunately, a lot of loan officers are impatient, they don't have a long-term view, and they just move on. In addition, your borrower is getting bombarded by the servicer of the mortgage as well as every other mortgage company that buys a list that has your borrower on it. I mean, geez, Quicken Loan will spend as much as $900 million marketing to your clients on an annual basis. So it stands the reason you will lose that customer to someone else, unless you are consistently keeping in contact with your database. How do you keep in touch? Well, that's actually up to you and what you feel most comfortable with. Personally, I prefer email marketing. It's always worked for me and I get results. Plus, once you put the time into compiling your database, it becomes easy to send out the emails. Yes, people will unsubscribe and some will send snarky emails in return, but you will also be surprised at how many people read them. I've had people who I never imagined were actually reading my emails tell me how much they enjoyed or appreciated one that I sent. I sent product information, industry information, motivational information, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, anything that I find interesting, I put into an email and send it to my database. Now, there's two key points here. Number one, don't worry about using someone else's information. That is exactly the definition of copyright. And number two, just because you read an article or liked a post, don't assume everyone else has seen the same thing. Just share it with your database. Let them filter it. Don't do it for them. In the interim, you're continuing to make contact with your database and getting to the 6+ contacts that generate results. When I first started marketing to my database, it was amazing how for 4 or 5 months, I did not get much response. I did monthly emails initially. Then after month 6, it was like the floodgates opened up and I started to get steady responses. Now, regarding the frequency of your emails, I once worked with a consultant who said, when all else fails, send more emails. Frankly, I try to be more considerate than that and generally stick to about 1 per week, and that seems to work well for me. At a minimum, I recommend at least monthly. You have to remember that your desire to sell does not always match the other individual's desire to buy. You have to actually match the two desires to make the sale. That might take a few weeks, a few months, or a few years. But by being consistent, you will put yourself in position to match your desire with the client's desire. Now, another option I like a lot, if you have the resources, is snail mail, particularly now when everything's gone so virtual. Joe Girard was a car salesman who was once listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the highest volume car salesman in history. His book, How to Sell Anything to Anybody, is a great read. In that book, Girard talks about how he would send a card every month to his past customers. Valentine's Day card, Groundhog Day card, birthday card, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Every card had his business cards in them. At his highest level of sales, he was sending out 2,500 cards per month. He needed a full-time staff to handle it all. Now, according to the book, this marketing campaign helped him sell on average 25 cars per month, month after month. I'd say it was a good investment for him. Now, in a prior section, I mentioned that I always work with college interns. In exchange for minimum wage, a letter of recommendation, and work experience they can put on a resume, I usually had very good success with my interns. Although I had a few who were exemplary. Most were good kids who were content to do administrative functions. I will go into more detail about a few great programs you can use with the more talented, motivated interns, but the administrative functions are very helpful. What did I have them do? Input names in my database and send out monthly cards. I always wanted the cards to be handwritten so they were personally addressed and looked to be coming from me personally. That is a great thing for college interns to do. It was also pretty easy for them to grab Homes magazines, et cetera, grab realtor contact information and put it into my database. I'm sure you can think of many other ways to use a college intern to build a database. If you prefer a virtual assistant or an in-person assistant, I think it's wise to consider finding someone to help you build your database and maintain contact with those individuals. From personal experience, I can tell you that it is well worth the time of finding one, as well as the cost of having that person in your operation. Also, as you find more talented people, there are many ideas and marketing concepts where you can utilize them to increase your database as well as increase your volume. And I will share some of those ideas with you in future mods. In summary, building your database should be one of your main objectives in your personal origination business plan. It is the foundation of everything else you will want to do moving forward. Thank you.